You're on CYInterview.
I'm Krishanik. Featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me. Last week, legendary martial artist and stuntman judo Gene Lebell died. He was 89. He was one of the pioneers of mixed martial arts. Today on CYInterview, we welcome back former boxer, actor, and filmmaker Gary Stretch. Gene Lebell was featured in Gary's documentary film, The Ronda Rousey Story, Through My Father's Eyes. You can currently watch it on a variety of streaming platforms. Gary, thanks for joining us this morning on CYInterview. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're always happy to have you, Gary, and it's always an interesting conversation. So just to begin, when did you first meet Gene Lebell, and then what did you think of him after meeting him?
I met him in early 2000s, but so I got to know him a little bit. I used to go to the gym Highest End, which he has in North Hollywood with Gokar Chavichin. And as you know, I may have talked about it in the past. I'm doing a little documentary. I've been shooting it for 20 years, but it's like my little baby. It's a film called Safest Place on Earth, which is in the ring for fighters. So I've got a selection of different fighters. And I went to interview Gene in 2010 for my documentary, and that's where he introduced me to Ronda. And that's how the movie Ronda began, because he asked me would I work some hands with her. There was no UFC for women then. It was 210. And there was no plan for women. And Ronda very interestingly said, I'm going to make them take women. And history, tells the rest. She did. But it was Gene I was interviewing, and he said to me, I want you to work with this girl, do me a favor, give her some hands. So I took her on the mitts. And then I got to know a little bit about it, and that's how the movie came. But it was really through Gene Lebell that the Ronda story was, born.
And what should people know about Gene who have never met him?
He's a very interesting man. I love psychology, and he was someone you couldn't work out. He was an animal in some regards. In other regards, he would never swear in front of ladies. He was like he had a very, very kind of crossover, like complex personality. What you see is what you get. He was a comedian, very, very funny, but then he could turn on a dime, which was, people around who knew Gene, he was certainly not a bully. He was an absolute gentleman, but you always had a sense of he could turn on a dime. He never kind of switched it off. Even in his late years, when he was very old, he still put the fear of life in people, because he had a side to him that was very, very, a little bit dark. And it's like when Gokar went over to Japan and fought someone, like a comeback fight. I can't remember, but a huge Japanese guy. Gokar broke his arm in the first round. But Gene said when he put him in an arm bar, I heard him break it, and he broke it. And so I said to Gene, why do you break arms? And he said, they don't forget me, Gary. But breaking arms can often end careers. But he had that edge. He said, if you get in the ring with me, Gary, or my guys, I tell my guys, break it. And so he had a dark side to a very beautiful person. He was just, as a human being, tremendous, beautiful, kind, funny. But when it crossed over into when you fight with him or one of his students, then he had a side to him that was ruthless. He taught his guys, be remembered. And so, he went all out when it came to the fight game.
Jay?
It's interesting, Gary. You were on a panel with us a number of years ago with our friend, the late, great Rick Drayson, who passed away, unfortunately, back in 2020. Rick was a golden age bodybuilder and a professional wrestler who was also a good friend of Gene Lebell, and said the kind of things you're essentially saying right now. Speaking to that, as I understand it, he continued to get on the mat and actually instruct into his 80s. Did you have a chance to see any of that and see him in action in his 80s?
I saw it all the way till the end, yeah. He have a great friend, Pete Antico, who in fact introduced me to Gene, and me and Pete used to go to Highest End. We trained sometimes a little bit, but Gokar and Gene would, if Gene didn't like something that he saw or was trying to coach. He would get on the mat and show them. He wasn't a teller, he was a shower. So he was active until the last time I saw him, which is maybe a year ago. You know, he was very, very, and still really physically strong. He used to get hold of my arm sometimes, showing me like little arm locks or little tricks he used to do, pressure points. He used to really hurt you in his 80s. You know, he was like very, very strong all the way to the end. Yeah.
Interesting. You mentioned Pete Antico. I want to say that Pete Antico a few years ago ran for the president of the Screen Actors Guild and is one of the, I don't know if he's still active, but one of the top stunt men and stunt coordinators in Hollywood. And if I recall correctly, he's also been a collaborator with you, right?
Yes, he produced the movie, the Ronda film, with me. He is the guy who introduced me to Gene. Pete ran for the Screen Actors Guild. I wish he would have got it. He's such a smart guy. He suffers from Tourette's. He's had Tourette's. He got Tourette's syndrome when he was 7. And what he's achieved throughout his career. I have a friend, Monty Cox, who's a very famous big cat guy, amongst other things, stunt coordinator. And Monty said to me, if I had to rely on one person to hit a button, you know, to stop me dying on a stunt, it would be Pete. And yet Pete has Tourette's and his body's very sometimes out of control. So Pete has achieved amazing things. He doubles a lot for Pacino and De Niro are the two main guys that he doubles. And so he's had a huge career in stunts, and he's producing quite a lot of stuff now. And again, he's very political in this Screen Actors Guild, and it would be great if we had someone like that to run SAG, but he didn't manage to get in. Did you hear the recent Dave Lee just passed also?
No, I did not.
Dave Lee was a stunt double. He's also a great friend. He was a stunt double for Batman. He was the Batman, amongst other movies. He just passed out the blue last week. I just heard about it.
Actually, not necessarily because of the kind of things that typically people pass away from, but I have to say that over the last 2.5 years, because of the pandemic, I lost a good number of people, young people. One was 56, one was 47, one was 62. The last few years, for a number of reasons, have been quite difficult. But, one thing I think about you, Gary, from the time I met you back in 2017, and I think what was so special about your Ronda documentary and so forth, is that you were able to bring a humanizing view to people in the hurt game, to people in a game where, unfortunately, the goal is to hurt somebody else, but to show the deep sensitivity and the pains that these people carry themselves and why it brought them to where they are and how they're some of the actually nicest people in society and perhaps most honest people. I do ask you, do you have any insight into what drove Gene? Did Gene come from a dark place as a youth? Did Gene go through some terrible things as a kid that kind of developed that burning fire in him to succeed on the mat and in the ring?
Well, it was funny because I got into the psychology with Gene, and we were very, not great friends, but we knew each other, and I felt I had a good relationship with him. But we got into a little bit of the stuff you know about, that we've talked about, the fertility of fighters, and I got into it with Gene a little bit, and he turned on me in a funny way, and it was in regard to his father, and I knew that was the driving force for Gene. I don't think Gene knew, but it was ironic because he wouldn't admit it. He said, no, nothing to add. My background was fine. And I said, okay. I get into a whole conversation with him, and I said, what age did you start fighting, Gene? He said, 7. And I said, how old was you when your father died, Gene? And he said, 7. And I said, I rest my case. And then it was like an uncomfortable, and it's on film, one day you'll see it. And it was definitely, I've studied this subject, studied the subject for many, many years, which is the documentary I'm going to eventually bring out, and probably early next year. I'm almost done. But there's there's great power in fertility, and I think that there's a guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, David Goggins.
Yeah, of course, David Goggins, the Navy SEAL, one of the most incredible men alive.
So Goggins is the typical example. This is a guy who was overweight as a kid. He was abused by his father. He had a terrible upbringing. His mother was a great woman, but was never there. She had to hold 3 jobs down. Goggins was a lone child, afraid, insecure, overweight, everything against him. In a black man in a white environment, he said, he was the only black person in his school. He had everything against him, and everything he said he was terrified of everything. And he created another person. There's David Goggins, and then there's Goggins, who he created. He sat in a room, and he listed all of the fears, all of the insecurities, and he wrote everything down he didn't like about himself. He said, I was a liar, I was this. He said, I decided one day, okay, let's start today. We'll go one day without telling a lie. It was that simple. He started to break down, and he created another person. He said, the world made me this way. I'm going to make myself the other way. So I think we are a representation of our upbringings, the people around us, our experiences, all deliver us to what we become today. And so if you think about it, if you wake up today and you're not happy with yourself, if you look back, generally life has brought you to that. So life can also take you back to what you want to be. So Goggins got this brilliant idea. Okay, who do I want to be? I'm the same person, but I'm going to change all of these things that life did to me, and I'm going to create someone I like. And it took him some time. And he said through pain and suffering, he found incredible satisfaction at the end of it all. He said, do you think I enjoy running tomorrow? I know now I've got to get up at 5 and do my run I don't like it. Like everyone thinks Goggins is like he loves training. He hates training, but he does it. But there's something at the end of it. It's a feeling that you get when you accomplish something you didn't want to do that is exhilarating, and it gives you a real sense of self. And it's like if someone just went for a little run in the morning, had a shower, then went to work. Their day normally would be much better than if they just dragged themselves out of bed after a night on the drink and crawled into work. There's something about physical fitness and health and the steps that you push yourself to go through that I believe creates a certain amount of satisfaction. And when we're satisfied, we function better, I think. So, I think Gene and every fighter I've ever met, they've got a story, and fighting is a way in which they deal with that insecurity. I was a very insecure child, but I was a very good fighter. And how do you put them two equations together? You cannot, unless you use the insecurity to get you up in the morning. You use it because you're insecure. If he's going to run at 5, my opponent, I'll run at 4:30, and if he's going to do 3 miles, I'll do 4. And that whole insecurity, if it's put in the right direction, becomes a very powerful driving force. And I think most great fighters have that, or come from that, and they surpass it through, courage and will and dedication. But I think they all need that burning emptiness, a hole to fill to achieve what they achieve.
Gary, I've had the pleasure of speaking with many fighters and people in and around the fight game, and at times I served as a ring announcer in professional boxing and so forth, but I don't think I have met anybody who even comes close to your insight and your ability to verbalize and contextualize the nature of fighters and fighting and what drives them. And I would go so far as to say you are the philosopher king of the fight game in its numerous forms. It's interesting you bring up David Goggins. For our listeners, I believe either 3 or 4 years ago, maybe it was back in 2018, I can't remember for sure, he wrote a book that I think he self-published initially called Can't Hurt Me. And if I recall, the book must have, I think he was on Joe Rogan either one time or more than one time. I think he sold like 2 million copies of this book. I read it. It was an absolute phenomenal book. He talks about things like callousing the mind to, in effect, Yeah, to create an ability to go forward. He also talked about something of being uncommon among uncommon people. A very, very fascinating individual. It doesn't surprise me one bit that you know him.
Also, never get civilized.
Yes.
And the other thing, the greatest thing I ever that I heard from him, he says two words, and I live my life by this now. And this is Goggins. If I ever get the pleasure to meet him, I'll shake his hand and I'll say, you know, you've changed my life in a way. And I've been around. I'm not impressed by a lot of this stuff, but this man really. He said two words: "What if?" That was it. What if? Because he said he wanted to join the SEALs and he was 300 pounds, and the guy said, if you get in, you'll only be the 34th black SEAL to qualify in 70 years. So he said you're 150 pounds overweight, you're never going to make it, forget about it. And Goggins said to him, what if I can? And he said, well, if you can, you can. I'll see you back here in 2 months. You need to lose 100 pounds before we even let you in the course. And he came back 2 months later, he'd lost 100 pounds, and his journey began. And that was his whole beginning to the journey he went on. But he often says, what if I can? What if I can? And it's a very powerful statement, because people tell people every day, you can't do this, you can't. And you say, what if I can? You're not boastfully saying you can, you're just saying, what if I can? And that journey of the what if is what is magical, because if you do, how are you going to feel? It's a beautiful idea. You know, what if I can? Well, then you go on the biggest battle of your life, and the biggest fight you'll ever have is with yourself. And the fight with yourself is what will win the fight with everybody else. But first, you got to win that battle with yourself, and the battle starts when the alarm clock goes off at 5:30. Are you going to get up? And that minute before you hit snooze, you've got like 30 seconds. You hit snooze or you can get up. 90% of guys I know hit snooze. And Goggins is the kind of guy who just gets up. And it's that, he said the biggest battle is the 30 seconds before you wake up. Once you get up, it's fine. The hardest part of training for me was getting to the gym. And on the days I didn't feel good, I often had the greatest days in the gym. So you never know. You still feel like it, but you have amazing days. So the big journey is getting to the gym. Get on the road. You know, I used to train in England. When I turned pro, I didn't have a lot of money. I was in an apartment, no central heating, no hot water, and it was freezing cold. And when the alarm clock went off at 4:30, it was ice cold. It was a war to get out of bed. And at some point, if I got out of bed, I was trying to put my shoes on, I'd get back in bed because it was cold. It was so cold. So eventually, I used to go to bed fully ready with my shoes on. And when the alarm clock went off, I just started running. I would wake up a quarter of a mile down the road, because if I had to put my shoes on, I wouldn't have gone. And that was the journey to me, from the alarm to getting out the door was the hardest part of any training I ever did. Once you get on that road, it works itself out. But that split second is what stops us achieving things every day of our life. And if you've got to just get rid of that split second and just get on with it. And if you can, and it becomes a habit, anything can be achieved, I believe.
And what's so interesting about that is bringing it back to Gene Lebell, thinking of his achievements. I believe in the 1950s, for 2 years running, I think, if my memory serves, maybe you can tell me. I think for 2 years in a row, he won a heavyweight AAU judo contest. He was the judo champ, I believe, at heavyweight 2 years in a row in the 1950s, and then he's widely credited as having the first mixed martial arts fight. I believe he fought a boxer,
Milo Savage.
And that comes back to what you were talking about what if? What if? In other words, the people who are willing to say, yeah, well, okay, I don't box, but I'm a judo player. What if I get in the ring with him? What if I match up my skills with him? What if I have the burning desire to go forward and figure out a way his game and see how my game can supplant him and surpass him? What if? And
he said to me years ago, because the heavyweight thing you're talking about, at the end of every competition, all the different weights, the winners, they used to have this thing where if they wanted to, they didn't have to, they could all fight off for the ultimate champion. So all weights could fight, like a lightweight could fight a heavyweight. Everyone who won was allowed to go into this competition where then they would have the ultimate winner. And Gene won it a number of times, beating much bigger guys. And I said to Gene once in the gym, you know, this guy's huge, Gene. And he said, so much more to grab, Gary. So much more to grab. And I was like, he just was, that was his thing. And yes, he had the first martial arts fight with Milo Savage, a boxer. Gene was a wrestler and he broke his arm. His fight was stopped. Yeah. So he was a pioneer. And I think the greatest thing about Gene, I believe, was he made you believe anything was possible. He was very, very, you know, Goggins style. Like, there was no... he believed he could do whatever he wanted to believe. Whatever you want to do, you can do, and that was a big thing. That I think he was a massive influence on Ronda. Even in the days before UFC for women, he was one who says, "We'll make it happen." I don't think she did it on her own. I believe Gene was a huge part of that, and I think he was a huge part of her demise. I think when she left Gene and go-kart, I don't believe mentally she was ever the same. And again, it just shows when you know, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You know, it's the same in the gym. The people you have around you, people don't realize how important the support and the way in which it washes onto you, the brain. You know, you can be in a fight, and if you've been around Gene long enough, you'd be in a fight, and there's no quit in you, because you would have to go back and face Gene. And so if you didn't have a Gene Lebell in your life, maybe you don't have to face anyone. Maybe you'd have to face yourself and you'd hate yourself. But it's not like having to face the likes of Gene and go-kart. And when you're around them people day in, day out, it influences the way you think. And there's no quit in you. You can't go back and look at these people if you quit. And I think that, you know, it's so important to surround yourself with winners, with people who strive for greatness, and it rubs off, and accidentally or on purpose, who knows? But it certainly rubs off on the way you perform. What's
so interesting as you're speaking, and you're speaking about, you know, Gene being in someone's corner and as a coach and having to face him, I can't help but think of the trajectory of Mike Tyson once Cus D'Amato had died, because I think you could look at Mike Tyson's trajectory as Mike Tyson with Cus D'Amato and Mike Tyson without Cus D'Amato. And I think that if we look at it, there was certainly a qualitative difference in the fighter, Mike Tyson, while Cus D'Amato was alive and after Cus D'Amato had passed. Do you agree?
Completely. It's like you could break this down so simply. Give me a man with a son and show him his life, and take the son out of the equation. As soon as you lose responsibility of something, you have no responsibility, you get away with whatever you want to get away with. But when you have a responsibility, you have a responsibility. When Mike was with Cus, he had a responsibility to Cus. When Cus was gone, he had no responsibility. And then he was accountable for what he did for himself. He was terrified to do it, because I had a similar thing with my trainer, Mr. Freeman. I didn't care enough about myself. I didn't love myself enough to care enough to win for me. But I couldn't get beat at Mr. Freeman because of the amount of work, the amount of love, the amount of belief he had in me. I just couldn't let him down. So I never did it for me most of the time. Eventually I learned to do it for me, but it was a long, long time. I had to do it for myself eventually, but I would never let Mr. Freeman down. I was his life. My acting teacher years later said, if you don't trust yourself, Gary, trust me. You're amazing. You have all this. I know you don't believe it yourself, but do you believe me? Do you think I'm a lie? Do you believe me do you have belief in me? I said, you're amazing. I love you. She said, well, if you don't trust yourself, just trust me and we'll get there. So I learned to trust others and eventually learned to trust myself. And I believe that Mike would never let Cuss down because of the investment Cuss made. He couldn't let him down. But when that was gone, he didn't mind letting himself down. He hadn't been around Cuss long enough to learn to love himself enough. And so it went down on a very quick trajectory, as we all saw. But yeah, I do believe, if people coming from these backgrounds who don't have that great belief in themselves, if they believe in someone else, they'll do it for someone else. If someone come and had a fight with you tonight, you might get beat. But if you come home and they're attacking your daughter, there's no way you're going to beat. Why? You're doing it for someone else, but your mind is, there's no loss. You can't lose because you love something more than yourself. And so if someone's attacking your daughter, you're going to get rid of the guy. If it was you alone, maybe he would beat you. You don't know. What is that thing? That is the psychology of the fight game. What is that thing when you cannot allow yourself to lose because something's at stake? Your daughter. But you don't value yourself that much if there's no daughter involved to take it that far for yourself. Unless you evolve, you learn, and eventually you'll die to not lose for yourself because you value yourself that much. And, a lot of the greats, all these great fighters, they have that thing where they how far you want to take them, how far you want to go. And they find a way. And that's great belief in themselves or someone else. But it's all on the belief circuit. And I think when people break with the coaches or break with relationships or things happen, deaths and things break that belief system, then the power seems to diminish.
It's so true what you say, Gary. You almost brought me to tears right now. You took my memory back between the years of 5th grade and 9th grade, which was about when I was between, I'd say 9 and 13. I went through a good 5-year period of getting beaten up all the time, and I mean all the time. I'm beaten up, watches broken, clothing ripped, books thrown down the sewer. And this wasn't by one or two kids, having to deal with a bunch of kids. And when you're a young kid, when you're an adolescent, when you're at that age, it's a tall enough order to fight one person, to fight, a few people. Not very feasible, but I was always afraid, and I always lived in terror. But it's interesting. As much during those 5 years as I didn't robustly stand up for myself, I can't think of one time that a friend was in trouble that I failed to stand up for my friend. So I didn't have enough belief to stand up for myself, but I never thought twice about standing up for a friend. And it took a long time to learn to be able to stand up for myself in the same way that I would unthinkingly and naturally immediately stand up for a friend. I can say this, I'm so pleased that you were able to come on with us this morning. You really give tremendous philosophical insights that have practical application to the lives of everyone. We wish you continued success. I'd love this kind of a thumbnail sketch you've laid out for us for Gene and the wisdom that you've shared with us this morning, and we wish you continued success here at CYInterview. Chris?
You can learn more about Judo Gene Lebell and Gary Stretch's documentary film, The Ronda Rousey Story, Through My Father's Eyes, on a variety of streaming platforms right now. So for boxer, filmmaker, and actor Gary Stretch, featured columnist Jay Bilstein, and CYInterview, I'm Chris Yannick.